It was Thanksgiving, and only 5 plates were arranged instead of 6. I lingered at the edge of the dining room, letting my gaze rest on the table that had been a fixture in our family for years. My usual spot had vanished, replaced by a bowl of imitation eucalyptus, an unlit candle, and a heavy silence. My sister, Natalie Archer, arrived 20 minutes late, breezing in with a stylish coat and a voice designed to draw everyone's attention. "Oh, Juliet," she announced, making sure her greeting carried across the room. "Still opting for understatement, I see." Her words sounded almost like an act of generosity. I slid into my chair across from Natalie without saying anything. Throughout dinner, my sister held court as if presiding over her own event, recounting her recent promotion and how her manager claimed she was the brightest presence at work. My mother's face lit up with pride. My father gave an approving nod. Even my uncle, Robert Klein, who can never recall anyone's birthday, asked for more details about my sister's achievements. Nobody questioned me. Nobody mentioned the long flight I'd made to arrive. There wasn't any curiosity about the projects I hadn't shared online. No one even asked how I was holding up. Then at one moment, my sister Natalie leaned in a little. Her voice was honey-sweet, yet sharp enough to hurt. She remarked that it was almost admirable, the way I'd vanished, like taking a year off, only stretched into 5. Laughter broke out after that, with no attempt to stop it. I stayed composed, didn't explain myself, just lifted my drink and tasted it, letting the uncomfortable moment pass on its own. The reason I could do that was simple. I was aware of something my sister, Natalie, hadn't realized. That impressive paycheck my sister kept boasting about, I was the one who authorized it. But not yet, and certainly not here. So they can laugh if they want. Let them misjudge me yet again. That's fine. It would only mean that, afterward, their silence would be even more noticeable. From their perspective, I seemed to be floating, not just moving from one job to another, but wavering between entire directions, between versions of my future self. For my family, figuring things out really meant that I was judged for abandoning what everyone else considered a flawless trajectory. In reality, I stepped away 5 years ago from a career that appeared impressive, but felt more like constant depletion. The compensation was generous. My workspace boasted large windows. The conferences featured colleagues who offered polite grins but never genuine warmth. And my sister Natalie was among them. Natalie worked 5 floors above me and never acknowledged that we were sisters unless she needed a favor. She would say things like, "Revise this presentation. Complete these calculations by tomorrow." Make it look like the idea came from me. I complied every single time, until one day, I stopped. One morning, I closed my computer. I turned over my access badge. I walked away from the name etched on my office door and an email inbox brimming with unread compliments. There was no dramatic send-off, no parting message to the team, just a quiet departure and a personal vow. I would begin again, following my own path on my own terms. As the years went by, I created something unexpected. A boutique consulting company, streamlined and discreet, significant enough to matter, yet still operating under the radar. I managed 3 contractors, operated without a physical office, and took on clients who always paid promptly and never questioned my educational background. I kept quiet about it, didn't update my bio with new job titles, and chose not to share any details with my family, allowing them to form their own ideas of who I was. According to them, I was the dropout, the dreamer, the one who couldn't quite settle down. They treated that narrative as fact. But I refused to let them have the final say about my story. The turning point arrived the next morning. My sister, Natalie Archer, sent a message. "Brunch tomorrow. Bringing the girls. Dress cute." No explanation. No inquiry. Just instructions sparkling with flair. I stared at my phone for a long time. It had been years since I'd seen Natalie anywhere except at family gatherings. Having coffee together wasn't something we ever did. She never reached out. The final time we found ourselves alone, she questioned whether my continued freelancing was intentional. Part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't heard her, but another part chose not to, since I already knew where she worked. 2 weeks earlier, I had reviewed her department's quarterly results. My company, Eastgate Consulting Group, had been brought in to resolve internal inefficiencies, and her department was one of the targets. Of course, she had no idea. All she saw was my name, Juliet Caldwell, in her inbox, on the contracts, approvals, and payroll documents. She assumed I was unseen, so I told her yes. Absolutely. What time? She answered right away, as if she had always expected I'd follow her lead. Why? The Golden Birch. Don't be late. Of course it was the Golden Birch. That figured. It was exactly the sort of venue designed for people who wanted to be seen. Spotless white plates, windows bright with sunlight, waitstaff greeting me by name and snapping a photo for the cafe's Instagram feed. I set my phone aside and headed over to my closet. I wasn't searching for anything elaborate, just a crisp outfit, sturdy footwear, and maybe an edge sharp enough to slice through that table if circumstances called for it. She expected a show, her ideal vision, so I gave her a display, just not the character she assigned me. The Golden Birch greeted me with the aroma of lemon peel and the gleam of polished ambition. I arrived precisely on schedule, exactly on time, not a heartbeat too early or too late. The hostess studied my shoes a few seconds longer than was polite, then flashed a smile that suggested she had just filed me away in her mind. I spotted my sister, Natalie Archer, beckoning from a table in the back. She was surrounded by 3 women, all dressed in coordinated neutral tones, their eyes shiny from drinking mimosas. Their laughter filled the cafe at that confident, unmistakable volume. When I took my seat, everyone remained seated, making no move to acknowledge me. My sister Natalie barely lifted her gaze as she greeted me. "Hey," she said, stretching out the greeting to give it an air of false warmth. "We were just talking about dating apps. I'm off the grid." I probably still believe swiping is only meant for payment cards. They chuckled together. One woman, Serena Mathis, as I recall, tilted her head before asking, "So, what is it that you do?" I was about to respond when my sister, Natalie Archer, interjected. She said, "She's discovering things, leading with her heart and leaving the spreadsheets for later. That kind of unrestricted living is uncommon." I gave my tea a slow stir. The server arrived holding menus, but Natalie waved him away. "We'll go with the prefix. She's with us." That final statement, "she's with us," cut much deeper than it should have. There was no welcome in it, only a clear pecking order. My eyes went to their watches, their natural ease, and the unwavering sense that I had to be vouched for before I would be accepted. I let her words stand, said nothing about Eastgate Consulting Group, made no reference to her division or her salary, nor mentioned the name found at the bottom of my contract. Instead, I grinned softly, took a measured drink of water, and carefully arranged my napkin on my lap. I let everyone assume I was insignificant. That would only make the reveal more striking. Brunch continued, as if they anticipated nothing unusual. We traded anecdotes about industry events and demanding clients, mentioning colleagues who failed to do their share and junior staff who broke down under tough feedback. My sister, Natalie Archer, thrived in this atmosphere. She was outspoken, well-groomed, and theatrical. I allowed my sister to dominate the conversation, watched the food arrive and disappear, responded with a polite smile when necessary, and nodded when required. I let the picture of me that she had crafted linger a bit longer. Suddenly, the waiter reappeared, holding a check presenter with a leather cover. He set it down in front of me. It's already taken care of, he assured us easily, in a way that suggested this was the norm. The payment had been processed using the card from Eastgate Consulting Group. That was the company, right? My sister's eyes widened. Hold on. Eastgate? What do you mean? The waiter looked uncertain for a moment, then made sure to specify. It must be whoever made the reservation. The partner account from Eastgate Consulting Group. They're regulars here. My name's Natalie, right? At first her expression stayed still, and then I caught a brief shift, a spark behind her eyes, surprise and doubt wrestling for control. Yes, that's me. She turned her gaze toward me, actually seeing me, maybe for the first time that day. I remained calm, kept quiet, and took the check, opened it, and glanced at the zero balance like it was nothing new, because it wasn't. One woman leaned in, clearly interested. You work at Eastgate Consulting Group? What does your team do? She asked. I folded the slip and tucked it neatly back in. We handle performance management, was all I offered. Rising from my seat, I straightened my blazer and gave my sister, Natalie, a gentle, silky smile. Next time, I thought, just tell me if you want dessert on the company card. It'll spare you the shock. I made my exit, slowly, not even giving myself a moment to process it. This wasn't the first occasion when Natalie Archer had encountered my name. The reality was that she simply hadn't considered actually reading it. Several weeks prior to our brunch, she had received a performance evaluation from upper management, a routine assessment, carefully composed with tasks and objectives. She boasted about it on LinkedIn. She was honored to be chosen for this strategic project, eager to grow. Nowhere did she mention the signature at the end. My name, partner. My name was clearly displayed at the bottom of the letterhead from Eastgate Consulting Group, the firm her employer brought in to audit her department. I knew she had reviewed the bullet points in detail. She said she appreciated the structure of the report. She even repeated one of its phrases in a staff meeting. Yet when it came to the signature, she just glossed over that part, because the thought never crossed her mind that I, her sister Juliet, the one she once mocked for not putting my education to use, might be the person setting her KPIs, her deadlines, and the size of her potential bonus. Just a few months back, HR had brought her into a compliance meeting. It was a standard procedure. My firm, Eastgate Consulting Group, was already retained. My sister, Natalie Archer, signed the acknowledgement sheet as if she'd done it 100 times. At the bottom of the agreement, I saw my own signature, my own name, Juliet Caldwell. But after years of looking down on someone, I realized you lose sight of who they really are. You forget to consider that they might ever surpass you. So my sister didn't notice, even when it was right in front of her. And now, sitting at a table she once thought belonged to her, watching me leave without ever raising my voice, she finally understood. It wasn't because I explained it. It was because the name she had dismissed was the one that covered the final bill. When I glanced back at the table, Natalie was grinning, far too broadly, far too quickly. Wait, so you work there? She said, forcing a laugh, as if this was just a harmless mix-up we could all laugh off. Her tone was airy, but her hands revealed the real story, the truth. One hand was fixated on her phone, while the other nervously played with her napkin, tugging and folding it repeatedly. I lowered myself into my chair again. I don't work there, I clarified. I built it. A hush fell over the group. Even the waiter, lingering nearby with a tray of used glasses, hesitated as though sensing that something had changed. I blinked a couple of times. Serena Mathis, with her flawlessly applied lipstick, leaned in closer. Wait, you're Caldwell? As in Eastgate Consulting Group? Natalie, that's your payroll company, isn't it? Natalie let out a noise that was part cough, part laughter, and chose to remain silent. I took a measured sip of my tea. We've collaborated with various departments, I added in a gentle tone. But the tech division, that's close to my heart. The woman seated across from me widened her eyes even further. Natalie parted her lips to speak, but no words escaped. I picked up my clutch, glanced at my phone, and got to my feet. Ladies, thank you for brunch, Natalie. It's always a pleasure. I didn't wait to hear anything back. There was no need for her reply, since the true impact didn't come from my words. It lay in the hush that followed, in the abrupt halt of laughter, and the way nobody rushed to break the silence. As I made my exit, slow, purposeful, never glancing behind, I realized something my sister, Natalie Archer, was just starting to understand. I can't force respect. It must be given freely. Natalie called that evening. Not immediately, not in the lingering quiet that followed our brunch. It happened hours afterward, when the server at the Golden Birch had already cleared away the last of the glasses and the sun had set behind the trees, shrinking everything into shadows. My phone vibrated once, then a second time. I picked up on the third ring, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to know which truth my sister would try to spin. "Hey," Natalie said. "So that was strange, huh?" I didn't say anything back, letting the pause linger between us. She hesitated, then added, "I mean, I honestly just didn't know." I could have spoken up. We never would have. Even, well, you know. She didn't actually use the word mocked. She never said they made a joke of me. She didn't say anyone had been humiliated. "Why didn't you ever share what your job was with us?" she asked me quietly now, as if whispering could conceal her motive. She was leaning against the countertop, gazing out at the blinking city lights beyond my window. I knew she wasn't paying attention. I told her, but she was busy creating the narrative she preferred. There was only silence. Then Natalie Archer said, "Can we at least keep this at that table? I mean, none of this really matters to HR." Exactly. That was it. Not embarrassment, not remorse, just anxiety. It wasn't that I was forgotten, but that she was suddenly responsible for it. I told her there was nothing to be concerned about. The contract was clear on its own. She didn't answer immediately. Maybe she believed I was pretending. Or maybe she realized I wasn't. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't seeking to be heard. This time, she was the one hoping to be seen. The next occasion we interacted was online. I joined the quarterly audit presentation online 5 minutes ahead of schedule. As usual, the virtual meeting space appeared empty on my laptop. Stark white walls, orderly seats, and a carafe of untouched water sitting in the center of the table. Suddenly, the camera turned on, and my sister, Natalie Archer, entered the room. She didn't notice me immediately. She was in mid-conversation with someone outside the camera's view, gripping a leather folder as though it lent her more stature. When she finally glanced up, she caught sight of the monitor, and my image on it. At first her smile held firm, but then it stiffened, tilted awkwardly, and faded a bit at the edges. "Let's get started," I said, steady and even. "This session will address division expenditures and Q3 accountability." No one else participating said anything, so I pressed forward to the initial slide. The screen now displayed my analysis of inefficient practices in each department. My sister's name showed up twice, once as pending review, and once as a recommendation for restructuring. I didn't react, kept my tone steady. I simply walked everyone through the figures, the overages, the unmet goals, and the absence where I believed management should have intervened. I watched as my sister, Natalie, jotted down notes as if relentless writing might somehow undo what was already documented, but we both understood the records left no open questions. When we wrapped up, the director expressed gratitude toward me. A partner gave a quick nod, asking if escalation was necessary. I gave a small smile. There would be no escalation, only written records. In that instant, my sister Natalie learned a lesson no brunch conversation could have imparted. This wasn't a personal matter. It was strictly business. In that office beneath those bright lights, with my signature already securing the paperwork, Natalie was no longer my sister. She was under my review. The decision unfolded with no drama, no declarations, no shouting, just a note. I was informed that Natalie was formally placed on review until the audit concluded. The statement was direct, almost clinical. There were a few sentences about process reviews, oversight by the department, failure to meet internal criteria, but I understood their true message. Her advancement had been halted, my sister's permissions to travel were rescinded, and her access was scaled back until further notice. The schedule that once overflowed with meetings and management seminars grew noticeably bare. She sent me a text message saying, "Is this your doing?" I chose not to respond, because this wasn't about getting even. It was just a reaction. She had upheld a system built on the idea that some people were irrelevant, that invisible employees could be disregarded, elevating showmanship above substance and valuing loudness over genuine impact. Now, though, I found myself under the gaze of that same system. I began arriving before everyone else, working into the evening, rechecking tasks I'd previously considered below me. But now it was too late for those efforts, as the emails had already been retrieved, the files already examined, and I no longer felt compelled to justify my actions as I reflected her choices back at her. At the upcoming leader meeting, my title was now External Auditor. Throughout the meeting, I remained entirely silent. I exited the call before everyone else had finished. In the quiet that comes after someone is revealed, not blamed, I grasped something basic. I didn't need my sister to fail. All I wanted was for her to recognize her own position. There was no celebration or pleasure, only the consequence of her actions. I didn't return to the office. There was nothing left for me there. I submitted the final audit on a Friday. I affixed my signature in a sun-filled corner of the Golden Birch, a cafe 2 hours from the city where nobody recognized me, and the server addressed me warmly as ma'am. This time, I truly felt the quiet was warranted. My sister, Natalie Archer, never reached out. There were no phone calls or messages from her. Through discreet channels, as such matters tend to unfold, I learned she was exploring other job prospects, a courteous way of saying the organization no longer accommodated her as it once did. I used to be in that position myself. I no longer made myself smaller, nor did I apologize for being difficult to categorize, for creating something unseen, or for leaving before the applause began. I entered rooms with more intention, met people's gazes for longer periods, and let quietness linger if someone posed the question, "And what do you do?" Now my response didn't have to be summarized in a single phrase. It existed in my demeanor, in the way I was content to live without needing the approval of others, only that they didn't define me. Several weeks later, I crossed paths with the Golden Birch once again. It was simply part of the rhythm of life, not something I had planned. My sister, Natalie Archer, happened to be there. At first, she didn't notice me, but when she finally did, we shared a brief moment of eye contact. She glanced away, and I continued on my way. Not because I was resentful or driven by revenge, but because her acknowledgement no longer held any power over me. She no longer had the ability to define my story. That was impossible now, and it always would be. They have stopped mentioning me altogether now. I don't come up at Thanksgiving, nor does my name surface during casual chats. Even in the family group chat, where silence tends to carry more weight than any spoken slight, no one asks about me. That's all right, since I have realized I don't need anyone to acknowledge me to feel complete. I discovered that payback isn't always about dramatic confrontations or sweeping public apologies. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, felt in the calm of a room at peace, in the look someone gives when they finally understand who I truly am. I have no expectation for my sister, Natalie Archer, to apologize. She already communicated everything necessary when she chose to say nothing at all. And I didn't require Eastgate Consulting Group to dismiss her. That action was unnecessary. She simply removed herself from a position of influence that could never have been permanent. As for my journey, I came back changed. My sister could never alter the definition I set for myself. The signature that bears my name stands firm and unquestioned. I no longer feel compelled to define my own existence or fight for my place. I don't need to raise my voice or come out on top. What I truly needed was to quit acting out the role that had been assigned to me by my family. During brunch, they laughed together. I paid the bill and left without a second thought.